Winnipeg with only a few games left. Obviously, the Jets are kind of winding down their season, and I wanted to hand out a few more report card grades for regular season performances, even though the season's not quite over. We're basically close enough, though, to at least give a pretty good impression of how players have done this year, and we'll dive into, whether some guys have, gone above and beyond expectations, performed at level, or maybe fallen a little short. All on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
Or Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is 100% free and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Stay tuned to hear more about the Gametime app later this episode. Now, like I said at the top of the intro, we're going to dive into some player report cards for the Jets, a couple of guys that I haven't really had a chance to talk about. We're not going to talk about every single player on the team, but I kind of wanted to talk about some standout performances and grades that I think are worth kind of diving into, especially for projecting not only, this year's end of season performances, but also kind of into next year. Maybe some guys who deserve more ice time, bit of a longer look with the team, maybe an elevated role, as we are likely to have some departures over the next few months where some players are going to be heading on to greener pastures. Now, let's talk about Sam Gagner. Now, Gagner, for me, is probably one of Winnipeg's savvier buys in terms of free agents. I don't say that often in terms of, depth players that the Jets have picked up, but past season or so, Winnipeg has generally gotten pretty reasonable fourth liners. And what I like with Gagner is that he's a very savvy veteran who, early on actually contributed pretty healthy scoring rates. Sam is one of those players who, if you need to, you can ask him to play in your middle six or even in emergency situations in your top six. He's effective on the power play. Just a nice, really savvy, skilled veteran forward, kind of in the mold of, his name is blanking for me right now. It was the Buffalo Sabres guy who used to be one of their top players. He was last with, I think, the Sens maybe, or the Oilers. I don't know why his name is slipping my mind, but these kinds of players who you sign for, league minimum deals provide a lot of great experience, veteran presence, and versatility, which I think Gagner does. Unfortunately for Sam, he did suffer a bit of a season-ending injury. He's having surgery for it, or at least maybe had surgery a few weeks ago. But unfortunately, it has sidelined him for the rest of the year. And, he's probably getting to the age where retirement is not out of the question. But hopefully he's healthy enough to come back for at least another season. I certainly would not mind him joining the Jets again. I thought that he provided some really great scoring outlets. A lot of what his game was kind of focused around in terms of supplementing this Jets offense, I think he did a great job. Not the most fleet of foot player, but that's never really been Winnipeg's forte anyways. So if I had to give him a season report card grade, I think given expectations, and his level of performance, I would probably give him a B+. I think that's reasonably fair. There were moments where he did slow down and wasn't able to keep up necessarily, but that was probably when he was being asked to play every game and actually logged quite a few minutes. So Sam, I thought for what he provided, and if you're talking about purely bang for buck, well, then you can convert that to an A. I think for the money that the Jets paid, they got more than the value of his contract. He just kind of killed it for the Jets in extremely limited minutes. In a similar vein, Kevin Stenlund, another newcomer to this Winnipeg team, who I think has been a really positive influence on the bottom six. And like Kevin is maybe less offensively inclined, brings more of a defensive two-way presence than Sam does. But Kevin, I thought, anchored the fourth line perfectly. In fact, I think if you compare him with like Adam Lowry, Stenlund for me probably wins out. He's a hard forechecker. He brings that good size that the Jets always love and rave about, but instead of being a player who can't use it effectively or whose size limits his mobility, Kevin kind of gets up and down the ice pretty good. He's got some real jump and legitimate skill, which, we'd seen in brief blasts in the past with like the Columbus Blue Jackets, but on a consistent day-to-day basis, I didn't really expect him to be as solid as he was for the Jets. Again, another bargain signing who I think Winnipeg really kind of made out like bandits with. I mean, this guy can play at even strength effectively. He's really solid on the PK. Just a nice, versatile fourth line forward. And again, you're not really expecting him to be a major point scorer or anything, but in terms of offering, a strong presence down the middle that doesn't hold you back in terms of creating offense or, offering some defensive support, I think Kevin did a really nice job. If I had to give his season a grade, I think B plus, A minus, kind of similar to Sam Gagner in that range would be pretty fair. Maybe not going to light the world on fire, but in terms of the role that he's been cast in and for what was expected of him and how much he's being paid, again, really, really good value for the contract. And I think the Jets can be thrilled with his performance. He seems like the kind of player that's going to end up in Tampa Bay and kind of have like, I don't know, a 15-goal season or something alongside that, always talented bottom six of theirs. Now, of course, there are plenty of other players to get through, including one of our star young players in Cole Perfetti. But before we go any further, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at Gametime. I was talking about them earlier. If you have no idea what Gametime is, it's a great service that helps you find all of those last-minute tickets you might be looking for. Personally, I do a lot of concert ticket shopping, and let's be real, it's hard to find a good deal. Oftentimes, you're diving through tons and tons of pages for events. Some of them are sold out. Some of them have really expensive fees. It's just a pain in the butt, isn't it? That's why Gametime is really convenient. They take a lot of great events and give them to you in very easy to digest formats, showing you all of the stuff happening in your region and the cheapest tickets available. They offer killer last-minute deals, some stuff like people clearing out tickets if an event is happening that day. They offer the best prices. They can help you get those last-minute deals right before they expire. And again, like I said, they offer plenty of flash deals, last-minute tickets, and they also give you seat views so you know what you're buying into without going in blind. I think seat view is always one of the most important things for me. You don't want to be sitting up in the nosebleeds for like $60 and find out that you can't see anything. And best of all, they always have a lowest price guarantee and event cancellation protection. So again, it's very easy and very customer friendly. I highly recommend it. They also offer plenty of promotions. And again, like I said, flash deals on tickets that, maybe other services don't have. And you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So right now, snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, be sure to download the Gametime app or go to gametime.co. Terms apply. And again, that promo code is Locked On NHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back as we are kind of talking about, report cards for the Jets and how Winnipeg has done this year. Talked about a couple of depth players. One more depth forward that I kind of want to cover, and then I want to talk about one of our star young players in Cole Perfetti. First, let's talk about the depth guy, though, who's actually kind of one of the young guns, too, if we're being honest. Morgan Barron, for me, I don't recall if we've talked about him previously. I might have given him a grade earlier, but if I haven't, I have to say I was really impressed with him this season. Last year, I thought he was solid enough, right? But Barron, for me, has really started to show levels to his game where, a lot of the junior scoring and lower league scoring that he was known for, we're kind of seeing how he accomplished that technique-wise. I feel like he's constantly getting into really good shooting positions. He's often on great counters. And again, he's another big body player who doesn't really let that hold him back from being mobile. I think his instincts and his spatial awareness are very solid. I like his forechecking ability. He ticks off a lot of the boxes of what I was looking for with Mason Appleton when Kopp left, right? Appleton, we all know, hasn't exactly had the return to Winnipeg that I think he was hoping for, but Barron has more than made up for it in terms of his level of impact. I think the only thing that I would say with Morgan is that his finishing this year hasn't always been ideal, although when I watch him and how he's shooting and why he's not scoring, I tend to look at it more as just goalies being pretty good at getting those cross slot passes and reacting very quickly. Otherwise, I think Barron has been in all of the right areas to score a pretty decent amount of points. Honestly, I would like to see Barron get a second line deployment at some point. I think he might legitimately be good enough to occupy somewhere in that top six. Again, as like a more complimentary forward, and it's not like the most ideal situation, but if you're looking to try and balance your team and give that top six not only responsible defensive presence, but also offensive forechecking prowess, and you don't want to sacrifice the skill. I think Barron for me has really shown that. And increasingly, he's finding himself on the score sheet a little more frequently. That shootout or that penalty shot goal that he had the other night was just flat out sick. So I feel like for him, the dam might be finally starting to break. Maybe he'll cash in on a few more chances. There's clearly a player there that I think the Jets are very fortunate to have, and very underrated skill. I think next year it wouldn't shock me if he had, I don't know, increased role, maybe increased ice time, and if that kind of led to like maybe a 35 to 40 point season, I think he's very much capable of that, especially if you give him the right players to work with. Given his performance this year, I feel like a B is a very solid grade. I think he took a noticeable step forward from last season. It just seems like he's a much better player this year. We're seeing more of his dynamic offensive ability. All in all, very successful year. A B might sound low, but trust me, in the context of things, it's really not. That's actually a very darn good grade, especially for a player who is mostly a third liner. So really impressed with Barron. I think there's more upside to his game, and I think next year could be maybe his big coming out party if he finally starts to get more ice time. Now, the other player that I kind of want to wrap up with the forward groupings with is Cole Perfetti. And Perfetti this year, I think, was one of the most exciting players to follow. Cole obviously had some puck management issues. I think, at times he overthinks things and tries to force plays because he wants to create that opportunity. And he's used to kind of threading passes through opponents that pretty much no one else on the team can even attempt. With Cole, though, I think on the whole, you just have to really appreciate his season. He was in the running for the Calder for a little bit. I think that you saw some really good defensive work from him as well. His creativity was evident at even strength. He didn't really get much of a look on the power play, which for me is a bit of a disappointment. But on the whole, I mean, Cole was a really important part of that top six. And when he went down for the season with an injury, I think that absence was extremely noticeable. Perfetti, I know, hasn't exactly had the healthiest start to his Jets career. I think part of it's just a little bit unlucky, but as he kind of starts to physically mature, he gets older and has a few more seasons under his belt, I predict that he'll be a really fantastic player for this team for many, many years. I think the biggest question going forward is he a center or a winger? And so far, I really want to see him tried as a center. I think the winger play has been very good. I think that we see a lot of the potential for him going forward, but down the middle, especially if Dubois leaves, that should be Perfetti's role to lose. I think Perfetti has the ability to pass, accurately and distribute as a great pivot down the middle. And because he doesn't have the world's fastest foot speed, I think this would actually suit his mindset and how he approaches the game a lot better. Also, he just flat out does a lot of defensive work. That dude will lay his life on the line to block shots, disrupt passing and shooting lanes, and force turnovers higher up the ice, which is kind of something that you would ask a lot of really talented centers to do. So maybe try Perfetti down the middle. You might not be upset with the results. That's what I'm looking forward to. But of course, the coaching staff would have to agree with me, and who knows what their plan is. Now, in just a little bit, I kind of wanted to pivot to the defenders. We haven't really spent much time with them yet, and there are a couple of grades that should be pretty obvious, and maybe some ones that are a little more on the surprising side. We won't get through all of them tonight, but certainly we can start off with our very own and resident Josh Morrissey. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Built. Those of you who know, I'm personally a big fan of Built, and I've really preached about the Built Bar before. And I don't say that lightly because I've had plenty of protein bars over my lifespan, and a lot of them are just dry and kind of nasty. That's why Built is really awesome. Built bars are the only protein bar that's more like a candy bar with a 100% real chocolate exterior and a soft, chewy interior. They've got great flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, and one of my personal favorites, an old standby, a very classic flavor, but raspberry dark chocolate, just really executed cleanly. You cannot go wrong with it. And as great as these flavors taste, they're even better for you, with most bars clocking in at around 130 calories, 4 grams of net carbs, and anywhere from 14 to 17 grams of protein. So no matter what you're looking for, whether it's a meal replacement, something before your next workout, or an afternoon snack, Built Bars are there for you. You can check them out at Sam's Club and Walmart in preset variety boxes featuring some of their most popular flavors. But if you want to try your own variety box, find your own favorite flavors, be sure to place your order at Built.com. Give them a shot today. I promise you, you won't regret it. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these final and closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're just wrapping up with a few extra report card grades. I mostly covered the forwards that I thought were really worth shouting out and talking about. Now I kind of wanted to transition to the defense. This is one of the more interesting sides of it because I think a lot of people are under the impression that Winnipeg's defense is bad. And in some ways, there are certain players who unfortunately haven't quite met expectations this year, but the others I think have actually done pretty darn well. Let's start off with the obvious one, though. Josh Morrissey. Jomo has had a year that I think a lot of people, myself included, just never really thought we'd ever see. For much of Morrissey's career, he's tended to be a guy who is an elite, complementary number 2. But when asked to be a number 1, right, defensively, Morrissey was never really that kind of player. Not unless he was paired with somebody who was more of an aggressive, dominant, puck-carrying number 1. For Morrissey, he was like that detailed secondary presence, the guy who would follow up on scoring opportunities, kind of be the trailing skater, and could offer defensive support while the other partners sort of did whatever it is they do, which, you watched enough Trouba, Byfuglien, a lot of those guys. You know how those pairings tend to work. They always like to be the main lead attackers. So Morrissey, under the new, past couple of seasons, the new role of the number 1 spot didn't really work, right? It just didn't seem like he was exactly the kind of player that you would expect from that role. And then you got Rick Bowness who enters, and he basically tells him, I think you're a Norris candidate. And just like that, Josh is unchained. This has been one of the best statistical offensive seasons from a Jets defender ever. It's not something that we're particularly used to, other than, again, Dustin Byfuglien, Jacob Trouba. Those guys are the only dudes who have really done stuff the way that Morrissey does. And Josh is setting career highs constantly. He's been scoring tons of goals, assisting on tons of opportunities. He's been a threat on the power play at even strength. And while his defensive game has definitely taken a step back as a result of him really pushing the pace further up the ice, it's a sacrifice you make all day. He's so offensively prolific and playing at such an elite attacking level that the rest of his game, you just have to accept that it's not going to be as ideal as it was in previous years, because when he was better defensively, it came at a massive, massive, massive cost to his offensive game. Not one person out there, I think, really thought he'd get back to his junior levels the way he is now. So congratulations, Josh. I'm going to give him an A+. I think that's the only grade he really deserves. I'm happy for him. I know the past few years have been really tumultuous, so it's just good to see him shining and beaming and at the top of his game. Now, the guy that he gets paired with a lot, I think, is worth shouting out too. Dylan DeMelo, for me, is one of the most underrated defenders on this team, and really one of the most underrated defenders in the league in general. Dylan is a player who capably occupies the number 2 spot. I think what surprises people with him is that he actually does have some legitimate offensive creation to his game. If his finishing was more consistent and he was more comfortable and confident in his shot, I think this guy would be one of the most uh, potent offensive threats on this blue line that we have, which is funny to say. Like, he's always in the right positions. When he activates aggressively, you see him jump into good shooting and passing lanes. He's constantly carrying the puck and doing tons of transition work. And then when it comes to the defensive side of things, he is super smart. He's usually in the right positions, cutting down shooting and passing lanes, occasionally using his body effectively as a shield for Hellebuck. I mean, whatever it is that you ask of DeMelo, he's usually been capable of doing it at a pretty high level. And he's done it for multiple seasons now. Sometimes, though, he has a bit of a slower start to the year. I think the start of this season wasn't super great for a couple of weeks, maybe even a month or so. And then DeMelo started piecing his game back together, and from then on, he was mostly like a top four, even at times top pairing level defender, a guy who was very good when asked to be in the top pairing role. He works well with Morrissey. It's a pairing that works. And, for a player who was brought in on a fourth round pick and has been signed to like a really budget contract, you just have to love what DeMelo has brought to this team. Also, vibes with him are super immaculate. So, for him, I want to give him like a B plus, I would say. I think the earlier start to the season definitely dings some of the season value for the grade, but overall, I mean, I really can't complain. I think he's been a wonderful addition, and I was very upset when he got exposed at the Seattle draft. So let's just say we're all glad that he's still here, because without him, this blue line would start to look a little bit grimmer. Now, we've gone through a lot of player grades, and I'm going to stop there because I want to save some for at least a future episode. Let me know what you think of these player grades and how you feel about the performances of either the forwards or the defenders in the YouTube comments below. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. Be sure to make your second listen Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result, Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the league with local analysis that only we can provide. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. As always, we appreciate your support, and thank you for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.